Hello, welcome. My name is Grace Chan McKibben. I'm the Executive Director of Coalition for Better Chinese American Community. We're going to get started now. Please be quiet and be seated. 大家好，请安静就坐。我们开始，请大家就坐，我哋而家開始。先，我哋前面咧就會用英文講話，如果你哋需要翻譯嘅話，請去後面攞耳機。我們在前面會用英語講話，如果你們需要翻。
Ryan, you done everything?
到後面
Good, clean up. The garbage can.
用耳機，或者都看住我們這裡紅色的就是翻譯。
Finish it. 還有你的拖鞋啊，your slippers, OK？
可以坐前啲，如果你唔要睇個熒光幕。Also, if you need parking validation at the end of the meeting, you can come to me or to Annie and in the back to get your parking validation for the parking lot that is in front. What I'd like to ask is for all speakers up here to speak slowly and clearly so that both the interpreters.
Okay, if you want to continue to watch a movie, finish the copy.
What you're saying. Also, for the audience, please be as quiet as possible, again, so that the interpreting software can pick up the speaker. So welcome and again to our fall town hall. CBCC has been hosting these town halls once a quarter, and we are very happy today to have Yesenia Lopez, who's our elected school board member. And then we will also hear about two important housing ordinances. One has not yet been passed and is being proposed, and one that has already been passed. And you'll hear all about these. But first, because it is election season, those of you that are paying attention might know that in Illinois, people that are running for office have already submitted their petitions to be candidates in next year's March 2026 primary. And now we have CBCAC's voter registration coordinator, Abigail Wang, who will come up and say a little bit about voting, why it's important, and what you need to know. So please give some applause for Abigail.
Hi everyone, I'm Abigail Wong and I'm the voter outreach coordinator here at the CBCAC. And let's just get started. So today I'll be talking about the voter registration. This will just be a basic one. Okay. So our topic outline will cover 6 general topics. One will be voter eligibility, methods of voting, important dates, polling places, what's on the ballot, and why should I vote? So we're starting off with voting eligibility. So how can you vote? You must be a U.S. citizen and you must be 18 by next year, November 4th. So you don't need to be 18 by March 17th, which is the next election, just by the next general election. So again, November 4th, 2026. And you must live in your election present at least for 30 days prior to election day. So there are 3 main ways you can vote. You can do early voting, you can do mail-in ballots, and then the final option is to vote in person, in which you can do the traditional paper method of voting, or you can use the digital voting machines where you can zoom in to the words, and there's also different languages available. I personally recommend early voting to avoid the long lines that can happen on election day. So we're gonna get some key dates here. So by December 17th of this year, so in about a month, you have to, the applications for vote by mail is open for the primary midterms. And by February 5th, this is when the downtown Chicago early voting begins for the midterm. So they get a bit of a head start compared to the 50 ward early voting, which is on March 2nd. Okay, and it is on Tuesday, March 17th, 2026, which is where the actual election day is on. So from that day, from anywhere from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., you can cast a ballot at your assigned polling place, which you can find out later on, or any vote center in Chicago. So you have, 13 hours. Okay, so you can scan this QR code right here to see where you can vote at. If you're a resident in this area, you can go to either the Chicago Public Library or the Hayden School. You'll have an assigned polling place on one of those places if you're a resident in this area. Okay. And here are all the ballots, offices on the ballot for this upcoming election. You can see there's a lot of local elections that are here. So we have US senators, we have one that's up for election, and then we have Illinois governor. So you can look, I won't read through all of them, but you can see there's a lot. And the reason why you kind of should pay more attention to this one is because there's a lot of local elections on this ballot. And they often have lower turnout rates than others. And in fact, these local elections are what actually impact you and your community the most. So this is something we found some data. So presidential election from last November received a 61.07% of a voter turnout from the 11th ward. However, for the primary midterms during June of 2022, we only saw a 22.74% voter turnout from the same ward. So let's try to get those numbers up, okay? And so what does my vote do? Now, these votes are what we use to elect the leaders here to make our decisions that directly impact us. So these local officials create budgets for schools, emergency services, community projects, libraries, road improvements, all that. And you're also, remember, you're voting for where your hard-earned tax dollars goes to, okay? So that's very brief presentation for why you should vote and how to vote. You can register with this QR code, or if you need help, you can go find me or come back. Yeah, here is our presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Abby. So if you have any other questions, you can go find Abby. She speaks Mandarin and English. Now I'd like to introduce Yesenia Lopez, who is the elected school board representative of District 7B of the Chicago Public School Board of Election. And I will introduce Yesenia first, and then she'll talk about what the school board does and what some of the policies that she's advocating for are. So Yesenia Lopez is a proud graduate of Chicago Public Schools, whose journey from CPS student to public servant continues to shape her commitment to education, equity, and community advocacy. She earned her bachelor's degree from DePaul University in 2011. Raised in Pilsen and Gage Park communities by immigrant parents, in a working class family, Yesenia understands the challenges many families face and has dedicated her career to ensuring every student has the opportunity and tools to succeed. She has served alongside the governor, members of Congress, and the Secretary of State, always championing for students and working families. A former community organizer, she has been a strong advocate for immigrant safety, dual language education, and equitable access to resources. As a Board of Election member, Yesenia focuses on building bridges, engaging with families, and advocating equity for the diverse communities she represents, leading with purpose and the values shaped by her own lived experiences. So let's give Yesenia some applause and welcome her to the podium.
Thank you, Grace, for that lovely introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Yesenia Lopez. I have the honor of representing you and the elected school board. So thank you again for that introduction. As you can see with the school board in overview, is our job is to govern and pass policies that pretty much direct what Chicago Public Schools, what they do for our community. So it's the first time that there's half of us are elected. And in my case, as you're gonna see in a future slide, I represent the area of Chinatown and half of the Bridgeport, among other areas. You wanna move on to the next slide, please? So again, school board and overview. My position is a non-paid position. It's considered a part-time volunteer elected by the voters that I represent in District 7B. And historically, the school board was only by appointment by the mayor. So voters couldn't decide directly who they wanted in those positions. It was a 7-member appointed by the mayor, and historically, it was not necessarily individuals from our communities. Right now, we are in a transition period. So the state has a legislation that now it can become an elected school board. So it's a hybrid board. Half of us were elected last November by our voters. The other half was appointed by the mayor. And then we have a board president who represents the city, and he is by appointment as well. Every board member, except for the president, we represent specific areas in the city of Chicago. Next slide. As I mentioned, I was elected last November in 2024. I am serving a 2-year term, which I started on January, and I represent District 7B in the southwest side of the city of Chicago. Next slide. Just a quick overview of the makeup of the board. As you can see, we're very diverse individuals. Next slide. Again, just a quick picture in case if you're wondering if you have family members or friends that live in different part of the city and they're wondering who their elected school board is, they can visit our website and you can put your address and it will show you who your elected or appointed school board member is. Next slide. So this is the map that I represent. As you will see on this area over here, I have a little bit of Garfield Ridge. I have Archer Heights, Gage Park, Brighton Park, Summit Valley Park. Then I have, as I mentioned, about half of Bridgeport in Chinatown area and a little bit of Pilsen on the up there on the map. So this is a district that I represent and I continue advocating for. Next slide. So that's a quick overview of just the 7B district. I wanted to share some data as it pertains to Chicago Public Schools. So we are the 4th largest school district in the country. We serve over 300,000 students throughout the whole city. And we have 630 schools throughout the entire city. I roughly have about 34 schools in my district. And then in the pie chart, you can see what the breakdown of the student demographics are. So we have primarily Latinx students at 46.4%, Black African American students at 34.3%, white students 11.8%, and we have Asian students at 4.9%. And this is again just the whole city. Next slide. So one of the main responsibilities that we as school board that we need to pass and vote on is the school budget. So the school board is somewhat similar. Think about your local school council, right? Each local school council, they pass the budget for each school. And also they do the evaluation and hiring of each principal in their school. We do that, but at the whole district wide. So in August, we passed a budget of $10.2 billion. We also had to close a budget gap of $734 million. A lot of what led to that budget gap was decisions made decades ago by previous board, members of the board. And also the fact that money that we were getting from the federal government during the pandemic dried up. So we had to make some difficult decisions to make that budget gap, but the board decided not to eliminate schools, positions that are directly working with students, because we don't want students to be impacted by, the budget gap. So, and the other part to note is that in the budget we passed, it's with the assumption that we're gonna get $379 million from tip surplus from the city. This number is based on the same amount of money CPS received last year. As you probably have been hearing in the news right now, the city just announced a proposed budget, and they're gonna be voting on it later this year. As far as we know, right now, we are on track to get 379 million. But we are also advocating with our city council to ensure we get that money for Chicago Public Schools for this fiscal year. You may be wondering, well, how do we fund Chicago Public Schools, right? Primarily, the largest bucket of money that you're gonna see in the pie chart here, the purple, we get funding from local revenues. So what does that mean? That means primarily property tax. When individuals are homeowners, you gotta pay the property taxes. There's a breakdown of where those property taxes go, which is gonna be like your parks, your libraries, public schools, among a number of other things. The second largest bucket where we get funding is the state funding. The third is the federal funding. With the federal funding, it's very specific to what we can use that money for. So federal funding is the free or reduced lunch. It's Title I. It's also for English learners and special education, among other things. But that's primarily the federal funding that we receive. Here I mentioned for this fiscal year, it does not include that COVID federal aid funding that previously for the last few years the school district, the city, the state, and the county used to receive. Next slide. Now this is a quick overview of how the money was budgeted for this school year that wraps up. Our fiscal year wraps up pretty much. It goes from the July 1st all the way until June 30th of the next year. So most of the funding, as you will see in the green there, is for our schools, goes directly to our schools, right? The citywide, those are for positions that might be, that serve the entire city. Right, for talking from individuals that need to go from one side of the city to another. The charter schools, it's a little bit separate because they are considered contract schools. And then we have the central office and networks that have the smallest percentage of where the funding goes to. Next slide. One of the departments that Chicago Public Schools has, and that I'm always asking the questions and advocating to ensure they have the proper funding, is the multilingual. So it's the Office of Multicultural Education, also known as OMED. So OMED's purpose is to guide CPS in providing a high quality education for all language learners that is attentive to culturally and linguistically diverse community of students, families, and educators. Next slide. So you might be wondering how many of our students in the city of Chicago are English learners. By the way, I was an English learner. I grew up speaking Spanish first, and then until I started public school, I started in Spanish, and then I transitioned to English. So I've seen firsthand the importance of having these type of programs on hand. We can go back. Okay, so roughly 27.3% of our student body throughout the city are English learners. Next slide. Some of the programs here that you're gonna see is transitional bilingual education and transitional program of instruction. These are policies in place that if a school has 20 or more students that speak a specific language other than English, they are required to provide them with transitional bilingual education. Then there's a different program for schools that have less than 19 students that speak a specific home language, where there are services provided, but it's slightly different. And then we do have dual language schools throughout the city, and we've been expanding those opportunities. What it means, dual language, is that a student starts learning 2 languages since they enter the school system, all the way until 8th grade, if it's a high school, from their freshman year until senior year. Next slide. The other topic that I thought it was important to give you some context and information is currently what is happening primarily in the city of Chicago, how our communities are been impacted due to the increase of federal agents in the city. I know the Bridgeport area and also Chinatown recently have been impacted. Immigration is something that I've been very vocal during the meetings and also internally with the district to ensure that we have protocols in place to protect our students and our staff and our parents as they are picking up and dropping off students. So as a reminder, CPS does not share any personal information with the federal government. CPS does not ask our families about their immigration status. And also CPS does not allow ICE or federal agents to enter our buildings unless they have a warrant signed by a judge, and that needs to be reviewed by our legal team until they even are allowed in the building. Next slide. We can go to the next one. We went over these. We have also done protocols and provided guidance to school leaders. So the clerks, the securities, the principals, and what to do if ICE is near the school. For example, if that means they need to go into soft lockdown, right? What does that mean in the trainings for the staff? We also started a command center in October where principals can pick up the phone, call internally at this command center and get guidance on what steps to take. Regarding parking lot usage, ICE is not allowed in any of our parking lots, and that because that is considered private property. We've been putting up signs to remind them. And also some of our parking lots are not able to be closed during the evenings or weekends. So what right now we're doing is working with the city to try to get more barricades that we can put in place during evening and weekends to prevent ICE from using our parking lots as staging areas. And also CPS has created a direct webpage that you can go to. It's cps.edu/immigration. It has all the resources for families. The other item I want to remind individuals is that if you have a CPS student, please update the contact information that you have with the school, that emergency contact information, right? Because if there's an emergency, that's how the school is going to know if they cannot reach the parent. Who else in the family can we call? So please update that form and also develop an emergency plan in case if your family or someone else that is impacted. We had, at least in the district I represent, too many cases where students have been impacted directly. Once we learn about the situation, the principal and the school counselor works with the student to provide support with the social and emotional. And also we ask them to report it to the hotline with the ICER to try to help them get an attorney or any other resources the family needs. Next slide. So now moving on some of the items that I've been able to work and get accomplished since I got sworn in earlier this year. One of their items was the charter school accountability. This came about after the Acero School Network operators tried to close 7 schools, with 5 of them being in the district I represent. So we worked very hard, we pushed, and we were able to get 5 schools saved. What this means is if there's going to be any closures in the future with charter schools, for there to be policies in place and also for parent engagement with the community. If a school tends to close, the community needs to be involved and hear from the community as the process, to develop that process in a transition plan. Next slide. The other key initiative is our green schools. So launching a pilot program where we can, one, address the infrastructure needs in our buildings, which the average age of our buildings is about 70 years old in CPS, but also pathway for jobs in the green field for our students in high school. And thinking financially, what is the way that we can solve some of the issues our buildings have while saving money in the long term? Next slide. So I presented pretty much what has happened. Let me talk a little bit about what we're working on and what we're in the lookout for what's next. So we continue monitoring what is happening with the federal funding. In particular, we received already $8 million cut from our budget from the federal government. We continue following the impact on schools, given the increase of ICE agents. Also, the board has been in a process for a number of months now, and thank you for those that participated in a community meeting earlier this year in the 7B district to talk about our new superintendent and CEO. We are in the process of hiring someone in the permanent role. Right now, Dr. King, who was appointed, is just interim. We are gonna be finalizing, hopefully in the next month or so, who the final candidate is. And also, some of you participated in our focus group that we had virtually. So again, thank you for your participation. And then the funding and revenue. The budget that I shared, the 10.2 billion for this year, we were able to get it through. But we are gonna be facing another budget gap for next year. So myself and other board members have gone to Springfield, continue going to Springfield, advocating for more sustainable funding. And also working with our city partners to secure long-term funding. But we also are thinking, how can we be creative, whether it be with philanthropy or other avenues of bringing in those resources to ensure that we continue having stable funding for the future for our schools. Next slide. Some ways that you can get involved is we have our board meetings. So we have several special meetings coming up. November 10th, we have a special meeting at 10:30. Our meeting is in downtown in the Loop office, but we also have them live streamed via YouTube. Individuals can provide either attend one by watching, two by going in person, or provide public comment via in person or virtually. So I encourage you to, stop by one of the meetings, and also one way to provide public comment, one way to engage is through public comment. So upcoming meetings, November 10th, December 3rd, and December 18th for as of right now. Next slide. Also, I have a newsletter that I circulated for the 7 districts, so feel free to scan and sign up for the newsletter. And that wraps up the formal presentation, and we'll wait for Grace and Sarah. If I can go ahead and open it for Q&A. I'll open it for Q&A. Are we asking individuals to come to the mic? Okay, perfect. If you have any questions or need clarification of anything that's said, please, if you want to come to the mic.
有咩問題可以上嚟呢度咪嗰度啊？嗰個唔要啊，任何嘅你嘅可以。
Hi, I'm Sharon. I have a question about like budgeting. So given the fact that SAT and ACT scores have been declining over the years, how will CPS face this decline in academic performance, especially with budget cuts, which means less resources to students?
Thank you for the question. Actually, it's a conversation that I was having earlier today with in a different panel with Advance Illinois, where the most recent report card for the Illinois, right? It shows that when it comes to the gains that we've made as a district, and actually even some of those gains here in Chicago have increased in the last few years, and we've maintained them. Our graduation rate is also has gone up, but our scores have not gone up as to reflect that, right? And oftentimes we gotta look at what is causing that delay. One of them that we were able to get those gains on the other metrics was because of the increased funding of federal, which allowed us for more services and more hiring. And the other item though is that attendance rate is it has decreased after the pandemic across the board in Illinois, primarily in Chicago. And there seems to be a tie with attendance rate and an ACT score. So we are working through the strategic plan, 5-year plan that was passed in 2023 by CPS. How do we decrease by 50% the attendance, absentee? Decrease it. That way we can focus more so they can get a higher score on the ACT and also the after school programming, which with tutoring to address those specific areas that they need more supported.
Do you know why, like, attendance have been decreasing?
Based on the information that we have, and it's also part of the conversation we were having overall, because it's a statewide issue. It's and also part of the, as mentioned, strategic plan. It's a multi-layer situation, right? From safety to also the economic barriers in some of our communities, especially in high school, where we see the attendance rate the lowest. Many of those communities are in low income, where the students also have an employment job to help provide for their families. So we're working to see how do one be engaged with families. How do we make sure that our schools are welcoming? Because unfortunately, sometimes also the safety that includes bullying that unfortunately happens whether it be online. And how do we continue working with the families? So even though the attendance has decreased after pandemic, like I mentioned, our graduation rate has increased. The reason for that is because there's been different ways of how do we ensure that students are able to make up the work for it and work with those families. But right now, what's happening because of the ICE and immigration, our attendance, at least in 7B district, is up and down. Right? If there was ICE agents down the street today, tomorrow, we're gonna notice a decline on attendance in those schools in that area. So as a board, we are looking into, can we offer remote learning or expand our virtual academy right now?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Katie. I have two questions actually, but the first one is CPS as a whole doing anything to aid students who did not receive their SNAP benefits?
So with that, we are working, actually was part of also a conversation that this week got brought up. So we're providing resources with, so we have a department called FACE, which is the family, let's see if I remember the name, family and community and engagement department. So they've been providing resources that are citywide, but then there's also ones that are particular to schools, right? So for example, in my district, I've been working with BPNC, also Commissioner Amanaya's office, who serves food pantry out in the back of the yards area, so it informing those schools in that area. So at a very local level, that's how we're letting them know. Something else that got brought up and that we're further looking into, because I also follow what other school districts that are similar to Chicago, what they're doing. So in Los Angeles, now they expanded to a third meal for the time being. So we're looking to see how can we make that possible here in Chicago. Of course, we go back to funding, or what other things we can partner up, given that a large percentage of our students are low income.
Thank you. How did CPS determine school fee waiver eligibility for this school year?
Are you discussing the lunch or the fee waiver for what exactly?
Just the general school fee waiver, like at the beginning of the school year.
I will circle back with the Grace and Sarah to be sure, but my understanding is that for each school, because each school has their own fees that is determined by their school leadership. So it's up to each school, but I will double confirm on that. Again, this is just for the fees as it pertains to the school at the beginning of the school year.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your questions.
Hello, I'm Bernice. So for some context, due to like budget cuts, my school often runs out of like soap and paper towels in our restrooms. So I was wondering how
will CPS manage that budget to be allocated for all schools? Also, they can receive their utilities and.
I definitely love to connect offline and hear more about that because that should not be happening. Schools should be having the toilet paper, the cleaning supplies to ensure that our schools are clean and a learning environment for our students.
Hello, I'm Deanna. So regarding budget cuts, how is CPS mitigating that moving forward, like especially for AP exams? I myself am a senior and after like junior year, I know I've taken a lot of AP exams to try to get college credit. And I do feel really bad for all of the new juniors this year because I know a lot of them are also taking a bunch of AP classes and hearing about how they have to pay for them now, especially like, I know in some schools it's a little different for pricing, but at Jones, I go to Jones. Our AP exams are around $95 and fee waivers only cover $40 from that. And it's preventing a lot of students from actually taking the exam because they don't wanna have to pay for it. Especially low income students. So how would we be able to do anything about that? Because I feel like that's just dividing the education gap between low income students and higher income students.
Thank you for bringing that in for me. And so I went to Benito Juarez, I'm a graduate from Benito Juarez. I took a few AP classes myself. And also coming from working class family. Paying $50. It will, make or break the bank. So I understand that, and also how do we offer good quality education for students, no matter zip code, no matter your, your background or your family's socioeconomic status. Another item is that I'll follow up on, just to see what the policy is. So, and I will use also this as a good, way to provide a little bit more, I guess, a description of what I, as a board member, can do and what I cannot do, right? As a board member, we do the governance, right? One analogy that I use is, let's say we are gonna take a trip across the ocean. As a board, we set up the destination, right? And pretty much a strategic way, in a way, like this is the vision where we're heading, and this is the budget that we have to make it happen. Then our administrators, which is our CEO and superintendent, right? And then we go to the school leadership. They're the ones that put the ship together and pretty much do the roadmap, how exactly the step-by-step that we're gonna get there. As governance, if it's a policy that is district-wide, then I can have influence. If it's something that is very specific to a school, then that's limited because we don't have the day-to-day operation, we don't do day-to-day oversight. But what I can do, what I've been doing is I can have a conversation with the school if something comes to my attention, right? And just understand if it's something that they need more support from the district side, that I can help. For example, if it was brought up regarding the paper towels and the toilet paper and other supplies. Is that a school issue or is it because they're not receiving from the custodian situation? If it's a custodian, then as the board, I can help push more as to what exactly the solution might look like. So going back to your question about the AP exam and the cost of it, I will definitely look into it and see what other options can we provide for our families. Because it's important, we actually, over the last 5 years, CPS has, the number of students graduating with college credits has been increasing. And it's because of programs like the AP classes and also our partnership with city colleges.
I have another question. How would these budget cuts affect free lunches and free breakfasts that students get?
The free breakfast and lunch is tied to the federal funding that we receive,
Okay.
right? And those are the forms that you will get at the beginning of the school year that you need to fill out about what your income is, the household. So all that helps inform, once they're processed, who qualifies for the free lunch and reduced. So the funding, like I said, comes from the federal level. As far as right now, there are no, we have not received any potential red flags that is gonna be kind of reduced. But it's something that myself and other board members will continue fighting if we ever hear that they plan on reducing that. Just because we also understand that oftentimes the lunch students receive in school might be one of their only meals they receive all throughout the day.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, we have breakfast for in the schools for students that go early and need a breakfast that they are served in Chicago Public Schools.
Hi, my name is Laura. My question is also about budget cuts. So with budget cuts happening, such as in the Chicago High School for Arts, and there are cuts in the art department, how will this also affect other student activities and non-academic departments, and how does CPS plan to address this issue?
Thank you for bringing us Shy Arts. So actually yesterday we had a special board meeting. And this is one of the items that we voted on. To give some background context to everyone else. Shy Arts is a school specifically for students, in the arts, whether it be the dancing, singing, playing an instrument, also the creative arts. And it was a contract school, right? So we have district managed schools. Primarily, most of our schools are district managed. That we provide the funding and we have a direct say with our protocols and policies. Then we have another bucket, which is the charter schools. Charter schools, they operate as in contract based. So they get the funding through CPS, but they not necessarily need to follow our protocols. They have a little bit more say on what happens in each school. So they, it's slightly different. So oftentimes with charter schools is we gotta be working with each charter operator to figure out what's what are they doing and how we can support them. Then we have the contract schools, and that's what Shy Arts, it currently is. The Shy Arts, their own board decided not to seek a renewal from us because of financial situation. So what the board did, from hearing from students, from parents, from teachers, I myself, I went to visit the school. They wanted this school because this type of school, a parent told me, they went and they visited a similar school that was private and it was gonna cost them about $30,000 or $40,000 a year. How can we make this type of environment available to students that want to pursue the arts? So as a board, we voted to now transfer into a school managed school, district run. So what it means it's gonna stay open. So we are trying to figure out also how do we stabilize the funding on the foundation side that they have.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sean, and recently I've kind of heard a lot of buzz around like the federal government shutdown. And I was wondering how that directly affects CPS schools and how you plan to support students to do that.
So right now, directly to my awareness, it has not impacted us, right, directly. What has impacted us is they're blocking $8 million from us because they want us to stop our Black student success plan. They believe that goes against what the Trump administration wants to do. As a district, we said, no, we're not gonna stop this plan and this committee because we need to support in particular, our Black students that we see that they oftentimes their numbers tend to be a little bit lower from attendance to their scoring. The other part is the Department of Education, as many of you have heard, at the federal level has been gutted out. What that means is that for our English learners, our special education, the additional support provided to our districts across the country no longer have that additional support from the federal government. So the shutdown, again, directly, not sure has impacted us. It has impacted more indirectly with families if they're seeking the SNAP benefits or even processing, for example, passport, other indirect ways, that's how it's also impacting families. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Eileen. I know you mentioned this in previous questions, but how are you or CPS currently supporting students that may be targets of ICE raids? And how can we further support them and their parents, families?
No, thank you. That's one, like I mentioned, through the protocols that we have in place. And also reminding students and families that at least in the schools, we have the protocols to keep them safe. Okay? And some of the schools are that we have Safe Passage program, which is a partnership with our community-based organizations. Those Safe Passage workers have been trained in Know Your Rights and also Migra Watch, which is ICE Watch, right? So they have a system in place if they see ICE activity, how to inform right away the coordinator of Safe Passage, the principal, and have students go back into the building. So Safe Passage workers are in the morning before and when students are walking to school, and in the later in the afternoon when students are being dismissed. We are seeking actually additional funding from the city to expand that program, in particular to communities where been hit the hardest by this. The other is working with our various nonprofit community-based organizations, our rapid response team. I am always thankful for the community and all those volunteers, whether it be with the whistles, whether it be also helping delivering groceries to families that don't wanna go out because they're living in fear. You know, 2 weeks ago, I was at Benito Juarez High School. It was a day of action. It was students had an opportunity to express all their emotions, whether it was through doing banners, whether it was doing poetry, writing letters to their legislators, or any other form that they felt safe expressing themselves. And also myself and the other board member in the 7th district and 7A, Pastor Renato, we went to talk to the students and they very similar Q&A. So we were answering the questions and taking suggestions. They asked me to work with the CTA to ensure that they felt safe while they're waiting for their buses, something that I already brought up to the district, and to look into remote learning. Those were some of the asks of students. So we're continuing, right? And I would say during that day, one of the hardest experiences I've ever had recently was being in the room as a student was being told by the principal that during that had been taken by ICE earlier today. You know, it was heartbreaking to see this 16-year-old hearing that news. My respect to the principal who knew how to handle the situation and the school counselor who also was there to provide support. And encouragement that I also stepped in with bringing in the alderman's office for additional support for the family. But, you know, as the principal told me, this wasn't his first time getting the news like this to a family. It was a 20+ time at that point.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? 啲觀眾有冇其他問題？對，還有沒有人任何問題？
我喺呢度咧就係講下關於即係我哋中國人嘅一個高鬆呢個問題咧，就本來係解決咗噶啦，已經係分配咗，後來咧就係呢個再話重新選址，咁有資金聽講話5000幾萬，5000幾萬嘅資金，但係到而家為止咧，一個仲未選到址。後來最近我問下咧，聽講話呢個公立學校嗰個領導話要停止，做咩要停止啊？我唔明白。
So, yeah, Miss Lam was asking, she about the high school, that, she is something that the Chinese American community had cared a lot about having a high school in this area. So she heard, you know, first, there were questions about the site that was chosen, and then, she knew that there was $50 million that was allocated, by, the state. And now it sounds like there has not been anything, so she was wondering what is going on.
Something that I will follow up on, regarding especially the money from the state, so I'll follow up with, Representative Teresa Ma and also Senator Villanueva on this. I know that it's something, received a few, it was something brought up as in the interest of having a high school that I've heard from other community members. So I was further looking to see what happened, as a lot of this was predated, from when this board initially started. And seeing if already have been conversations with CPS. So I'll further look into it. The other part I know when it comes to, and again, this is not regarding this particular potential site or school. This is just based on other conversations in the past when it comes to building expansions or new schools, right? Is my understanding, one is looking at the funding, looking how we can partner with other levels of government for them to also help with the funding. And looking at the need of our students to be able to build a new school. Overall, I do want to mention in the city, there's been a decline of enrollment. Actually, the decline is not just in cities, throughout the whole country, for various reasons. One of them is that population that has declined. So I'll look into that further. I know there was a new high school recently opened, Horizon Charter in the area. That charter does not have the charter through Chicago Public Schools, but it does have one through ISB. And that's one of the newest schools, high schools that I know open in the area. But I'll look into it, and then I would love to have a further conversation about it as well.
So, Mrs. Lam, was telling me that she wishes that the school board would, appoint a special committee to look at the site, or to look at site selection.
頭先我望過一下咧，因為我係唔識英文嘅，就話咧可能啲學生啊人數下課啊咁樣樣咧就幾個高中，我覺得咧唔合理，因為好多學校咧黑人好咩好啊，佢都有高中係嘛，我哋中國人係冇，啲學生覺得好遠，而且好唔安全。咁既然咧係經過領導同意嘅，選好紙㗎啦，而家有5000萬嘅響度啦。咁做咩唔見咧？係咪？我覺得唔應該。我提一個建議，嗰啲開發商嘅話咧，就上天腦度，邊度有好嘅地方咧，就見嚟賺錢。你哋教育局嘅或者係公立學校嘅，係咪揾一兩個咧，專門去考一考就基建邊個地方適合，主動啲去揾一個好嘅地方，等我哋咧能夠建設一個高中。我哋中國人好多好大嘅希望。如果再係搞唔到咧，我哋都覺得好失望我見到咧，大概2-3個月前咧，就話猶太人佢自己搞個高中2026年，總之2年咧就7年要建成，佢哋不過有市場資金，咁人哋都咁落力咁乜嘢，我哋已經領導上演各方面都得我聽到咧公立學校唔同意。我就覺得好氣憤，點解你哋咁樣唔同意咧？我哋幾辛苦咁樣先大家統一意見，係好迫切需要建一個咁嘅高中。
So she just wanted to make some comments that she thinks that developers always are able to find money to build buildings, and that she understands that she doesn't understand English very much, but she could see on the screen something about the population declining. She still thought that it would be important for Asian Americans, Chinese Americans to have our own school because other communities have their schools. And she heard that the Jewish community is raising money to get their own school. I don't know if that's really, So those are some of the comments. Just want the school board to look into it.
我覺得咧呢個係公立嘅係咪教育局嘅問題點解你話唔同意唔乜嘢？應該同我哋講清楚，有理由我哋覺得咧係冇理由，係咪教育局呢個咧就真係揸緊啲時間請啲人去盡量去快啲落實，咁大家群眾咧就擁護你哋。
So she urges that a school board comes and talks to the community and listens to the voices and not just say that, that we don't agree that there should be schools, so that people be able to, have their voices heard.
No, thank you. Thank you for the question and the comments. Mentioned I will follow up and see what the 50, I think it was 50 million, was that what it was mentioned? Allocated for and, what the update is. In regards to that, I am not familiar with, the fundraising being done for, the Jewish community either. But something I can ask at least, some of my colleagues who are Jewish that sit on the board. The other item and comment might have always seems to be money for other projects, in particular in the city. I agree. Oftentimes, even like I mentioned, our buildings in CPS, they are at least 70 years old. Some of the buildings in the 7B district are 100 years old. So there are a lot of need of infrastructure fixing, right? From the pipes to, the water fountains, new flooring, sometimes updates at the elevator. And it's an often question is, how can we secure that funding to ensure that our buildings are maintained? Because our students should be able to access, nice buildings that they can learn in. But thank you for your time, and the opportunity to share that information. I'll keep sharing other ways of being engaged, at least in my end. What I've been going is to community meetings like these to present and also talk to the community. I've been hosting mobile office hours in partnership with other local elected officials. As I mentioned, my position is non-paid, and I also do not get my own staff, and I don't get my own office in the district. So I rely on a lot in partnerships like tonight that are able to make it happen, that can provide this information to the community. The other way is attending the meetings, and then also different meetings that I have hosted and I plan to continue hosting. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you so much for our school board member for spending the hour and educating our community. It's such a new elected position, so we're glad to have more information on what the position does and how we can be more involved. Next, I'm happy to introduce Stephen Vance from Abundant Housing Illinois. He's going to introduce to us the additional dwelling unit ordinance that was recently passed in September, end of September. This is a critical presentation for us today because our ward have a decision to make as a community on whether to implement this ordinance ward-wide. And we have the chance to ask our alderperson to do so if we would like. So here to tell us more is Stephen Vance, and since you're this tall, I'm gonna give you the mic to hold.
Hello, my name is Stephen Vance. Next slide, please. And the next slide. Oh, this one, yes. Hi, my name is Stephen Vance. I am an urban planning consultant. So that means that I work for myself usually, but I also have customers. I am also an advocate for accessory dwelling units, which I'll explain in the next few slides. But I've been an advocate for accessory dwelling units since 2018, when I learned that they were banned in the city of Chicago. And then I was also a member of a task force that was between the Urban Land Institute of Chicago and the city of Chicago under the Mayor Lightfoot administration, 2019 to 2020. Next. So an accessory dwelling unit, and I will go through some photographs in a minute, are small homes. They are often called coach houses in Chicago, or granny flats, or basement apartments. And many decades ago, they were banned in Chicago by modifying the zoning code and modifying the zoning map. But that is all changing, and that's why I'm here. Next slide. So these 4 coach houses, which I call vintage coach houses because they are probably 90 to 120 years old, are very common across Chicago. There are very few neighborhoods where these do not exist. And these are very common on the west side, so Humboldt Park, Garfield Park. They're very common in Bridgeport, Farmer Square, just around here. Next. Then there are also basements. So many of you probably have seen these particular houses or some on this blog because these pictures were taken on 24th Street. And so often the basement unit will have its own entrance beneath the main entrance, and that is a clear indication that there is an accessory dwelling unit in that building. Next. There are now new coach houses though, and they look like some of the ones in these pictures. The blue one I'll talk about later, but the white one that's in the top right corner, that one is under construction in Andersonville right now. And then the one that's just a drawing is one that will soon be under construction. Next. This one, yes. So on this slide, I've enumerated 5 benefits of accessory dwelling units for ADUs. But I'm going to talk about the third one for now. So the third one says ADUs support aging in place and multi-generational housing. ADUs give families flexibility to share property and living spaces with extended family members. And so the people in this photograph, so I mentioned a minute ago, there was a blue coach house that had recently been constructed. And the woman in the middle of this picture, she's the one who lives there. Her name is Louise, and she is the grandmother to the baby that she's holding. And then the man standing to her left is the baby's father, and the mother is not in the picture, but mother is there. And so the Brian and his wife built the coach house for the grandmother, Louise, to come live in so that she could take care of, during the day, Brian and his wife's first child. And that was in October 2023. And actually, they've had their second child earlier this year. And so it's great that Louise, the grandmother, continues to live there to help take care of the children. Next. Another important benefit, and perhaps the most important benefit, and also the one for which we have the most statistical evidence and documentation in support of, are that ADUs add affordable housing to our housing supply in Chicago. And so Chicago, like a lot of cities in the country, has an affordability gap. What that means is that there are hundreds of thousands of people in Chicago and also nearby cities that are paying more than they can comfortably afford. And so that statistic is on the screen. In Cook County, 180,000 households are paying more for their homes than they can comfortably afford. And so new or additional solutions like re-legalizing accessory dwelling units is a way to add more homes more affordably. One statistic I can give you is that a survey of homeowners of ADUs in Seattle, Washington, Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver, British Columbia found amongst the 3 cities that 15 to 25% of those ADUs were rented for $0 for free to family members and friends. So we don't expect that ADUs will all be for free, but because of their smaller size and lower cost of construction, it's easier for some people to extend that generosity to their family members and friends. Next slide. So some of the backstory is that ADUs were banned about 70 years ago. And there is very little documentation that we can find in the public archives of news articles, but the best estimate is that the city was reaching its maximum population of about 3.6 million people in the early 1950s, and there was a fear that people would continue to build coach houses and have too many people living in them, which would be unsafe. And so the idea back then was that the city would ban coach houses, and that would help solve the problem. Whether or not it did, again, I do not have good evidence from news articles from that time over what the cause and effects were. Next slide. So the good news is that ADUs have been re-legalized, but before I get into the most current situation, I need to tell you about the pilot program. So the pilot program has been going on since May of 2021, and that has allowed people to build ADUs in only the 5 blue areas that are shown on the map. But it's been successful, in my opinion. Over the last 4.5 years, over 450 new ADUs have been permitted, and hundreds of those have been built. Now, this program will end next year on March 30th, 2026. Next slide. and will be converted into a permanent program starting April 1st, 2026. And so Sarah, when she was introducing me, mentioned that City Council had adopted this program in September. And it expands the program to beyond the 5 pilot areas. And so if you know zoning at all, this may be useful, but I'm going to try to walk you through zoning, which is a very annoyingly complex topic, but you have to know it if you want to build an ADU. So there is a list on the screen of the 4 zoning districts that allow or will allow an ADU once the program starts on April 1st. So RT and RM, B and C. So those, the street outside Wentworth Avenue is zoned B and C, B or C, but the street that intersects Wentworth Avenue, so 23rd, 24th, those are going to have RT and RS and RM zoning districts because they're completely residential zoning districts. Then there is some caveats, and this is what Sarah was alluding to. The RS zoning districts, these are where the majority of the single family houses are, but also many of the 2 and 3 unit houses are. Next slide. There are 2 ways that you can look up the zoning district of your property, and they are both listed on the screen. The first option is to use secondcityzoning.org, and it will tell you your zoning district. However, because of that complication of the RS zoning district, you may need to look up a second website, which is chicagocityscape.com/ADU, to see if the RS zoning district where your house was opted in. And so I'm going to explain that. Next slide. So currently, this map shows what areas will be allowed to have an ADU starting April 1st. They are colored in green. Only the green areas will allow an ADU starting April 1st in this ward. And the Poitoc Center is shown with the red star in the upper right corner of the map. The purple areas are not going to allow ADUs starting April 1st unless the city council person or the older person of this ward decides to opt in those areas. And so that was what Sarah was alluding to at the introduction. The older person can choose to opt in those areas at any time. So she could do it tomorrow, or she could wait until April, or potentially never do it. But so I just want to emphasize that in this particular ward, only the green areas will allow ADUs starting on April 1st. Next slide. So I'm going to go through some of the rules of building an ADU in case you are interested in doing so. So you will need to hire a licensed architect. And there is a list at that same website that I said before. And then you will also need to get a building permit, and you will need to hire a licensed general contractor. The number of ADUs that you can build is limited by the city zoning code. At the minimum, though, everybody who has a house in an eligible geography or zone will be allowed to have 1 ADU, but some homeowners and some property owners may be allowed to build 2 or 3 or more ADUs. And so the formula is you take the number of dwelling units that you have on the property now, and you multiply that by 33% and round up or down whether or not you based on fractions. And so if you can round to 2, then you can build 2. But the thing is that second, one of those 2 ADUs must be rented at an affordable rate. And so the city will ask you to confirm that you know that that is the law. Also, if you are building 2 or more ADUs, one of them is allowed to be a coach house. And remember, a coach house was that small house in the backyard. And then the second unit or the second unit can be the inside house, either in the basement or somewhere else within the house. Next slide. So I'm going to go through some of the additional rules that apply to when you build an ADU inside a house. versus when you build the coach house in the backyard. So when you're building an interior ADU, some of the normal zoning rules, so if you are a developer, develop housing, you may be familiar with some of the zoning rules. Those are forgotten for the ADU, they are waived, you do not need to comply with many of them. But that ADU must fit within inside the existing building. You are not allowed to enlarge the building to add the ADU to the building. And then you also need to check that there's a minimum of 7 feet ceiling height between the floor and the ceiling for the majority of the unit. And then lastly, each ADU inside will need its own electrical panel. It is not possible to share or not allowed. It is not allowed to share an electrical panel between the ADU and the rest of the house. Next slide. So now there are separate rules for building coach houses in the backyard. You can only have one home in that coach house. So you're not allowed to build a large coach house and have 2 homes. It can only have one home. And then the coach house is limited to 60% of the rear yard setback, and you will need your architect to calculate this number for you. And then finally, there is a labor requirement, and this, well, I'll give my opinion in a minute. But the city law requires that the people that you hire to do the work, the general contractor and any of the subcontractors, are participants in a registered apprenticeship program. So this could be a problem, or this will be a problem for many people, because there are very few participants in these programs in Chicago. When me and my colleagues attempted to locate a database of them, we struggled to find that database, but once we found the database, we found only 24 companies that were participating in these programs out of the thousands of companies that are licensed by the city to do construction work. Additionally, these programs are not diverse and have a very bad history of maintaining their lack of diversity. Next slide. So there are probably, well, we're going to have some questions in a minute, but if you want to learn more, I would scan this QR code. It will take you to an FAQ on a website called Abundant Housing Illinois. The FAQ, I wrote the FAQ. You can also email me. My email is there at the bottom of the screen, and I can attempt to answer the questions later if you don't want to ask them now. But yeah, that is concludes my presentation.
Questions from Stephen? Hold on. Hi, Stephen. I don't know if you remembered me, but I'm Annabelle from Converge Architecture. I think Converge Architecture, you came to IIT for review. I didn't know you were coming, so really happy to see you in Chinatown. So I'm an architect, you know, and I was approached by some potential clients, and a lot of them are developers, and then they are interested in the ADU program in the city. However, you probably know, since ADU is such a small square footage, the construction cost per square footage is pretty high. So I kind of just want to give your insight, because I have to get back to them about this question. Is there any way you find helpful to keep the cost down to ADU construction? And then if there's any new things, or is there any new updates from the new policy that will help us?
Yes, there is one. So first of all, are the people approaching you wanting to build an interior ADU or a coach house?
Coach house.
Okay, so I'll just stick to that then. The main change that benefits your future clients is that you do not, or if there is currently car parking on the site that requires that you would have to build the coach house over the car parking, you can remove the car parking, or you can put it somewhere else. And then
Not on the side, like not on the wall.
you can get rid of it permanently, or you can move it elsewhere on the property. And then you can build the coach house on the ground level and then save on the construction and design costs and the structural cost of making it a two-story building.
Is that a new policy?
That is a new policy
That helps,
it starts on April 1st, 2026.
okay. And then how do we get in your like, things for, the qualified architect?
So the list, the list of architects that I have on chicagocityscape.com is free for anybody to review.
Okay, to review means like to see the.
To look at it.
But how do architects get?
Oh,
to that?
click on the contact us button
Okay,
on the website and then,
then we'll talk.
and just add your details.
Okay, gotcha. All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I thank you for your explanation for ADUs. So I do have a question. So if let's say the board does not opt into it, is this still possible that can build an ADU, or if yes, what are the steps?
Sarah, can you go back to the map? Please. So the purple areas represent the properties that are zoned RS. The idea of having the older person opt in is that she can choose to opt in all of the purple areas or portions of the purple areas. Having all of it opted in would be better for everybody here. However, if she does not do that, it would be possible to change the zoning district of your property from RS to RT. And that would actually, and so that would benefit you individually. And it would, but it would cost you time and money, and you might have to hire a consultant. But that would be the workaround.
I see. So it's like two steps, like changing the zoning first and then switch to.
Well, I think it's two steps in that if the older person decides not to do the opt-in, then you have to do the change in the zoning by yourself.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Neil.
Right.
I wanted to ask how ADUs have had like any progress with combating urban sprawl, either here in Chicago or in other big cities.
Oh, okay. Let's say ADUs are part of a strategy to add more housing supply so that people can stay in the communities where they would like to stay in. Because one of the biggest changes that we're experiencing as a country is that people are having smaller families and more people are deciding to live alone. And that increases the need for more homes than we have available at the moment. And so that is part of what is driving our housing shortage in Chicago, Illinois, and the United States. And is also why we are seeing housing prices climb so rapidly. So Chicago, for the most of this year, has had the highest increase in rents of any big city in the country. And ADUs are a small part, will play a small part in expanding the housing options for Chicagoans. And since ADUs are generally smaller, that is more appropriate for somebody who's going to live alone or live with one person or a dog or a cat. It is also very appropriate, as I showed, for elderly people to live close to their family members.
And back to like urban sprawl, because obviously with people who do live outside of spaces, they're gonna take a lot of transportation into the city to work. So do you think this is going to be the next move for a lot of places to be able to help with vehicle pollution?
I'd say a short answer is no. I don't think ADUs will have much of an impact on reducing the need to drive so much. But because of how few of them get built and how it requires individuals to build them rather than one person building a lot of homes, like let's say an apartment building. I think so I don't think they really will have much contribution to reducing urban sprawl. You're
Hello, my name is Sean, and after like we talked about all these benefits of ADUs and like kind of the rewards of them, I wanted to ask like, what are the potential trade-offs? Like, what are some reasons why all people might not want to opt in, or like, just see both sides?
I don't think that there are authentic reasons to stop ADUs from getting built. But some of the reasons that people have said are that it will bring more people to the neighborhood, and we don't know who those people will be. And then a second to that, or related to that, is those additional people in the neighborhood will have a car, and they will make it harder for me to park my car on the street.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have questions for Steven? Okay, one year last question. Hi, Steven. How will an ADU impact homeowners in the area without the ability to build one themselves?
I would say that if you do not have the ability to build one yourself, you would not be impacted, but it is unfortunate that we do not yet have a program to assist people to build an ADU. And that is something that the group I'm a part of, called Abundant Housing Illinois, has asked for amongst some of the older persons. In the past, there was a program to help people afford to construct the ADU, but that program ran out of money very quickly and had some other issues. But we are hoping that the mayor and the city council will start a new program that can help people build an ADU for themselves.
Thank you. All right, if there's no more questions, thank you, Steven. All right, thank you, Steven. Thank you to Abundant Housing for your hard work, for getting this passed. Last but not least, we have Rachel Wilson, a volunteer of the Chicago Housing Justice Coalition, who's here to talk about a ordinance currently in city council to be considered just cause eviction. CBCAC has worked with the coalition previously to bring this issue to our alderperson. So we're excited to talk a little bit more about it today, and please give her a hand. Hi. Okay, I'd like to invite my friend up here. Hi, we can all introduce ourselves, but I'm Rachel and I'm a volunteer with Chicago Housing Justice Coalition, and I will pass it off to Jim.
Good evening. Get this one going. Okay, good evening. I'm Jim Garfield. I'm a housing attorney with the Uptown People's Law Center, located here in Chicago.
Hi, my name is Sabina Wong. I'm a family medicine physician, and I am also the clinic coordinator at the PCC clinic at the Boulevard, which is a medical respite for people experiencing homelessness.
Thank you so much. And so we're here to talk to you about our coalition exists. We're a group of many different organizations that all want to pass a just cause for eviction for the city of Chicago. And we'll talk more about what that is. But we're so happy to be here and thank you so much. So in the city of Chicago, a landlord can terminate your lease for any reason, and we as a coalition believe that that is not fair. That leads to gentrification, that leads to discrimination or allows more discrimination, and it's something that we need things to be changed in our city. And it's a tactic that's used a lot of times by developers who are trying to gentrify areas and raise the prices, raise the rents. You know, we've got a testimonial from someone who this is happening to in Logan Square. You know, if you've lived in a building for years and years, you consider it your home, no matter if you're a homeowner or a renter, and one day you may just get that notice for an eviction or a lease non-renewal that has nothing to do with how you have been as a tenant. It's just something that is totally outside of your control, and we want to put more rules around that for the city of Chicago. And I'm going to pass it to Jim to talk a little bit more about sort of the context, the legal context that exists in our city and why this is unfair for renters.
Okay, so right now, the law in Chicago is that if you have lived in your home for less than 6 months, the landlord can tell you, you have 30 days, we're not renewing, get out. If you've lived in your home between 6 months and 3 years, they have to tell you 60 days ahead of time, we're not going to renew your lease, you will have to move. If you have lived somewhere 3 years or more, then they give you 120 days advance notice to tell you, we're not renewing your lease, you have to move. And as Rachel pointed out, the reason doesn't matter. It could be that they want to demolish the building. It could be that they want to move in themselves. It could be that they don't like you. It could be because they don't feel like it. They do not need any reason. As long as they give you the proper advance notice, they can have you move out and you have no recourse. Next slide, please. Yes, this is the 120 days. Okay.
Thank you. So essentially, the Just Cause Ordinance, as we have introduced it into city council. And the reason why we are advocating for it is because it establishes a right for tenants to stay in their homes if they've done nothing wrong. But if you are a tenant and you're forced to move through no fault of your own, you've done nothing wrong, if that occurs, this is the difference. Now you're, with the ordinance that we're proposing, your landlord must pay you relocation assistance so you can move safely to a new home. This ordinance would ensure this right for all Chicago tenants, and for anyone who may have moved recently, you know the expensive cost that it takes to move. Getting your belongings moved, potentially taking days off of work to make it happen. It can be into the thousands of dollars easily for moving. So we know that this would just be something to ensure more fairness for tenants in our city. The main principle that we're operating off of is if a landlord offers you housing, you know, that's something that they do as a landlord, say this is a place you can live, and then takes it away from you for no reason, no fault of your own, there should be compensation. We also know that just cause can prevent retaliation against tenants and can help address gentrification and discrimination in our city, as it has done in other cities.
It is much easier to see other big screen, yes. Okay, so one of the key principles though, as noted, is the through no fault of your own. Just cause will not change anything if you do not pay your rent, you can still be evicted. If you break the lease, you can still be evicted. If you do something wrong, you can still be evicted. But if the landlord simply decides to say, I don't want you here because I don't want you here, that's when it kicks in. That's when the protections exist. So you are not entitled to relocation assistance for not paying rent, breaching the law or the lease, or if they say, yes, we'll renew your lease at basically the same terms, and you as the tenant say, no, I want you to lower my rent. Well, they don't have to do that. Now they can go ahead and ask you to leave. But if you do, if the landlord wants to occupy the unit themselves or put a close family member, if they want to do substantial repairs that require you to be out, if they want to turn it into a condominium, or if they want to demolish or remove the unit from the market, then those do entitle you to compensation. Next slide, please. Okay, we'll discuss the small levels.
Thanks, Joe. So we do realize that not all landlords are created equal. There are often our neighborhood landlords who own just one building that they live in themselves, and they're using that in order to get income.
And we want to make sure that our ordinance is not, unintentionally burdensome for that type of landlord, what some people call the mom and pop landlord. So these are the protections that we've baked into the ordinance, to ensure that it is more fair for those of us who meet the description. And the description for a small landlord in the city of Chicago is that they live in the unit, or they live in the building, and the building has 6 or less units. So some of the protections are that they're responsible for 40% less in relocation assistance than the general standard. There's flexibility for the landlord and the tenant to agree on how relocation assistance will be paid. There's a 50% rebate available through the city and 100% if they are moving in a family member. So essentially, if you're moving in a family member, you would be reimbursed 100%. If this were the case where you were asking your tenant to leave. Senior small landlords will be fully covered by the city for this, and then they are exempt from paying registry fees, and the new rental registry that is also part of the ordinance. Ooh, a little, can we get the next slide, please? So for this slide, evictions, are a racial justice issue, and we want to highlight that the higher eviction rates occur in a lot of higher percentage African American and Latinx neighborhoods. In context, the city average rate is 2.9 eviction rate, and the Lakeview rate is 0.8, and Lakeview also happens to be 79% white. So we know that a lot of the systemic racism and issues that have plagued our city, they come out in housing as well. So this is, we want to be able to stop unjust evictions through this ordinance. Next slide, please.
So evictions are also a public health issue. A lot of people don't realize how closely health and housing are related, but if someone struggles with their health, they often have economic strain and it might miss their housing, and then if it's housing, it affects their health. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. So evictions can cause economic instability by having to replace belongings, having to have major costs of moving, as well as job instability and job loss. And so sometimes people are evicted cannot actually find another place to live, and so then they go into homelessness. And homelessness has a lot of health risks. So for example, it can lead to poor mental health, stress, and worry. Especially for children, their health and safety is affected. They can have school problems, they can have behavioral health problems, and as you can imagine, it disrupts the community. So where you might have support from neighbors or family members that live nearby, or you also might be able to access your own doctor or your own pharmacy that you have medications at. When you have to move, then a lot of that is disrupted as well, and it can affect the health. So much so that people who are homeless have an increased risk of death than other people who are not homeless. And that is because of actually physical assault from being outdoors and not protected. It's from, still on the last slide. So being exposed to extreme weather, from being exposed to infectious diseases, from mental health problems, and also it's done on the bottom here, and also substance use. And it's not just a little bit that it affects people's health, it has a very significant effect. You can go to the next slide. Unhoused people are more likely to die and actually live 20 years on average less than people who are not housed. And that is because of all the reasons we mentioned, but and those, some of the things are acute. Like I said, they're not protected, they can have frostbite, they can have a lot of things happen to them, but also a lot of chronic conditions are more likely to develop in people who are without housing. So you can see on the screen, for example, diabetes in the general population, about 12% of people will have diabetes. But then if someone has ever been homeless, It doesn't even matter how long, it could have been a short period of time, but, anytime someone is homeless, if they have a higher risk of developing diabetes or having complications from diabetes, and that number goes up to 21%. So you can see a lot of chronic conditions, diabetes, asthma, high cholesterol, hepatitis, depression, alcohol use, opiate use, all of these things. It's not exactly positive. It's not that you become homeless, anything like that happens to you. But you know, just the numbers show that there's a much higher risk of some of these significant problems when you don't have access to secure housing. So I'll pass this on. The good news is that there are some things we can do to prevent homelessness, and Just Cause is one of them.
Thank you so much, Sabina. So Just Cause is not a new proposal whatsoever. It is in effect in more than 19 million units nationwide. There are 11 states and 20 municipalities that have a form of Just Cause in effect. At the federal level, all conventional public housing units nationwide, including ours in Chicago, are under a Just Cause type of rule. Privately owned units receiving project-based rental assistance are also under a Just Cause, and all privately owned units receiving assistance through the federal tax credit program, including those in Chicago. So this is something that has been tried and true in other areas, and it's high time that we have it here in Chicago as well. So you may be wondering, where are we now with the ordinance? It's been introduced. So we're working with alders and city departments to shore up support. We kind of have it back and forth with some of the city's legal departments on some of the legal language in the ordinance to make sure that it can be acceptable by the city. So we have, we don't have official support yet from the city, but we're kind of working on it. We're connecting with tenants who are directly experiencing this. There are a few tenants unions across the city that we have been working with. We're also calling for a Just Cause and who are dealing with the exact issue of being asked to leave their building for no fault of their own. And we introduced the ordinance, as I said. Our lead sponsor is Alderman Desmond Yancey of the 5th Ward on May 21st, 2025. And unfortunately, it was sent to the Rules Committee, which is not where we wanted it to go, because it takes a little extra work to get something out of the Rules Committee to be heard in Housing Committee and then eventually passed. But we are working really hard, and we're really hoping that we can get increased support externally from community groups such as yourself, and also internally from folks who work at the mayor's office. They're very interested in this proposal, and we're hoping that we can get something going with them. So, the next slide, these are just news articles that I've linked. If you are interested to learn more about Just Cause and what we've been doing, these articles are from when we introduced it, and it has more information on what Just Cause is and the types of organizations who are advocating for it. And then finally, we have the call to action. If you are interested in supporting Just Cause for eviction ordinance, there's an opportunity to send a pre-written email to your alderperson. I am an 11th Ward resident, and Nicole Lee is my alderperson. We have been really working hard to get her support, and she's listening to us, which is great, but we just need to sort of push her over the edge to get that final bit of support. And that's what people like you can do, is to call the office of Nicole Lee and email the office and say, hey, I saw a presentation on Just Cause for eviction. That's something that I support. Will you support it too? And on the next slide, we'll have a QR code for that as well. We have a pre-written email to the alderperson. Oh, maybe the QR code didn't make it in there, but there's a link there. On the previous slide, yeah, right there. And I can send it to you, Sarah, so you have the QR code for this too. But essentially, there's a pre-written email, very easy to send to the alderperson asking for support of Just Cause. You can also hold a Just Cause presentation for your community. Like if anyone here is in another group that they think people would be interested to hear about Just Cause, you can come talk to us and let us know. We'd love to come talk to you, to your group as well. You can also join our meetings. Currently, we're meeting every other Thursday at 10 p.m. It's a virtual, sorry, 10 a.m. Not p.m. And it is a virtual meeting. And you can, there's an email listed on the next slide, for how you can get in contact to learn about the meetings. And then finally, we're looking for people who are interested in sharing their stories. So if this has happened to you, if you are a renter who has been asked to leave through no fault of their own and has had to deal with moving costs, had to deal with the stress of trying to find a new apartment, we want to hear from you because we want to amplify these types of stories because they're not often the stories that get told. We all, if you're a landlord and you're in support of this, if you want to share your story as a landlord who supports, we have done that in the past as well, given landlords an opportunity to say why this is important for the community and why it won't hurt landlords who are doing the right thing. So that's another way you can get involved, and you wouldn't mind go to the next slide, please. These are other ways that you can contact us. We have an Instagram, we have a website, and you can also contact us and email us. And we also wanted to say we work very closely with the Metropolitan Tenants Organization Renters' Rights Hotline. So if you're out there right now and you're thinking about, I have an issue actually, and I'm a renter, this is the hotline that you can call to get those types of questions answered and try to get issues resolved as a tenant. There's also an online tenant assistant that we have linked as well called rentervention.com, where you can put in information about the issue that you are experiencing, and they will be able to lead you to people who can help you. So I think that's it. Anything else that you guys wanted to add?
There's questions.
Oh, all right, questions.
So if anyone has any questions, you can come up here. 如果有咩問題可以上嚟就如果有任何問題，可以在這裡提問。Hi, my name is Allison. I was just wondering about the mental health, how you guys were talking about how evictions cause like mental health issues and stuff. So I was just wondering if Just Cause helps with any of that, because I know you guys said that you guys were looking into getting landlords to provide compensation. And I know that it's mostly, I guess it's mostly through like housing, like helping to find housing. But I was wondering if you guys were providing mental health supports or like trying to work towards also providing mental health supports in addition to housing.
I do not believe that specifically mental health supports of Just Cause Ordinance. I think it's a positive effect of it, that if you are protected from eviction, that you don't have that stress. And again, you can stay connected to your medical providers and things like that. There are other things in the works for mental health support, but not specifically tied to Just Cause. But did it answer your question? But thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephanie. Thank you for doing the presentation. I wanted to know why you folks decided to go for the city approach instead of trying to do this at state level.
I have not been part of the organization long enough to give like a really good answer to that, but I think it has to do with capacity. You know, all of our volunteer organization and everyone who is part of the organization works for a different organization, and it's more about, you know, starting small and seeing where we can grow. One thing that is happening at the state level that we're not involved in, but we support, is called Lift the Ban on Rent Control. So if you look up Lift the Ban on Rent Control, and they're trying to essentially what it is, lift the ban, because there's a statewide ban on rent control that would require and the change in the state constitution. So they're doing workshops like this across the city as well as other places like Champaign-Urbana. So yeah, we definitely support them, but just for the organization and who we are and how many people make it up, it really made sense to focus on the citywide level, but hopefully, fingers crossed, once we pass it in the city level, it'll get some inspiration to go to the state.
I'll also add, part of it is Chicago is generally a very liberal, progressive city. Lots of, 50 elected alderpersons who have, or somewhere in the like moderate to liberal spectrum. And we're already having a hard time getting through that. Once you have 180 state legislators from downstate and out west, they have no interest in this. Their constituents, a lot of their donations come from housing providers who do not want this, because right now it would affect how much money they make. And so it's an even bigger lift at the state than it is in the city. And the city is already being a very large lift as well. So it's gonna be a question. I mean, here's the thing. If Chicago can get this passed, it can serve as a framework for the rest of the state. And I would love to see that happen. But the reason we're focusing on the city right now is simply because it has the best chance of actually passing here.
Okay, thank you for your answers.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, ma'am. Huh? Yeah, I think that's the end of our program. We have a few announcements. So let me see if I can-
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Announcing, Sarah, would you like me to read the announcements? Yoga, we're gonna bring up yoga. We have a couple coming, events coming up that we'd like to invite you all into. Okay. Yeah. Next slide.
Hello everyone, I'm Yuan Xiao, Senior Civic Engagement Manager of CAC. So we have two upcoming events in November. First one is on November 20th, Thursday from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. It's about general civic rights. As you know, like there are lots of terrible things happened like in our community, in our country. So we will talk about through like F1 student visas to H1B work permit to birthright citizenship. It's a virtual event online through Zoom. So you can scan this QR code to register. Or we have a flyer in the foyer, you also can go to take a picture. 我们11月20号有一个这个线上的一个会议，是关于公民权益的。这个公民权益呢是包含很广泛，从这个出生公民权到我们这种国际留学生的签证。到这种就是移民的申请绿卡的这些议题，我们都会提到。然后这个活动，我们的海报我们可以拍个照片，然后可以报名，可以通过我们的微信群报名也行，或者打我们公司的电话报名也可以。然后这个会提供普通話和廣東話嘅翻譯。呢一個咧係我哋一個即將開始嘅11月20號嘅一個。virtual meeting 就係網上嘅一個會議，就主要講嘅係公民嘅權益。就譬如話我哋依家出生公民權就係話有啲 BB 佢哋係美國出世，佢哋就可以攞到公民身份啦。但係依家可能聯邦政府話依家係 attack 緊呢個政策，就唔俾呢啲唔係呢邊出世嘅呢啲人攞到身份。同埋 student visa 就係學生嘅簽證啊，呢啲我哋留學生或者喺呢邊做工呢啲，就係外來呢啲移民嘅呢啲政策都有啲變化，我哋呢個會議都會講到嘅。如果我哋辦公室或者我哋前台嗰度都有呢個中英文嘅海報，大家可以影張相翻去，記得呢個時間，到時候去上網可以參加呢個會議。係有普通話同埋廣東話嘅翻譯嘅。Next slide, please. And on November 15th, we have another event. It's a documentary screening in our office. It's called Buffer City Chinese. It's a documentary filmed by like a Chinese American director in Memphis. talk about two generation to explore Memphis Chinese American community history. I'm not sure. I couldn't. The director will come for these events, so you have a conversation after the screening. Yeah, and also you can take a picture or go to the foyer or next have the events flyer. 呢一個咧係一個放電影嘅活動，係11月15號，係一個星期六下晝3點鐘，係我哋辦公室係免費嘅。咁講嘅故事咧係關於 Memphis 嘅唐人街，佢哋嗰啲唐人嘅故事。到時候歡迎大家嚟參加。我哋前面有呢個海報，大家可以影張相或者攞張海報翻去。可以邀請大家过来参加。就是这是一个电影放映的活动，是一个孟菲斯城的一个中国人社区的纪录片，讲的是那个城市中国人他们的一些历史。对，然后是11月20号的11月15号的下午3点钟，在我们的办公室，大家可以提前报名，就是我们前面有海报，或者你们可以拍一下这个照片，在微信群里面可以跟我们报名。但是。
到时导演也会来参加我们这个观影活动，然后大家如果看完电影有什么感受，可以跟这个导演去交流。然后我们今天大概所有内容就到这边。
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Thanks again to School Board Member Lopez, Abundant Housing, Stephen Vance, and Rachel and Co. from Just Cause Eviction. And thank you for everyone for being here.
谢谢大家今天过来跟我们来这个社区会议，多謝大家今日過嚟參加呢個社區會議，我哋咁樣結束啦，咁啊結束啦。
記得歸還一下耳機大家記得有拿耳機，如果攞咗耳機嘅話，記得還一還個耳機，再個耳機。
Anyone who is